I'm Heather Jenkins from Hand2mind. Welcome to our Teach at Home curriculum. This is the 4th grade, week 7, day 4 literacy video. Do you happen to like apples? Well, I love apples. And where I live, apples are really important. We have a lot of farmers that grow and sell apples all around this area. In fact, my town shuts down for a whole week during the spring to celebrate a festival all about apples and the apple trees that they grow on. You know, my daughter and I love to make apple pie. Here's a picture of a pie that we made during Thanksgiving. I can almost taste the warm, yummy, cinnamony taste of the apple pie. It tastes so good. All this talk about pie makes me think about how pie can be useful in determining the author's purpose when we read stories and text. So why don't you join me as we figure out why pie is so important when we talk about author's purpose. When we read, it's important that we understand the author's purpose. Authors write text for different reasons. The reason an author writes a text is called the author's purpose. It answers the question, why? Why would the author write this? When I think about author's purpose, I always think about pie. P-I-E. This stands for persuade, inform, and entertain. Now, let's look at each one of these purposes individually. Persuade. If the author's purpose is to persuade you, the author wants the reader to do something or believe a certain way. If you're reading and wondering if the author's purpose is to persuade, then you would look for opinions and reasons. When an author wants you to persuade you to do something, like let's say play a certain sport or to think that one holiday is better than another, they'll usually provide opinions and reasons. The I in pie stands for inform. If the author's purpose is to inform, the author wants to give the reader information about a certain topic. They might describe, explain, or answer a question about that topic. If you want to know if the author's purpose is to inform for a piece of text that you're reading, you might look for facts and information. Entertain. If the author's purpose in writing a text is to entertain, the author is writing the text for the reader to enjoy the story or have fun reading. If you want to see if the author's purpose for the text you're reading is to entertain, you might look for characters, a problem and solution, and a story structure. So a story where you can see a beginning, middle, and end. Now, let's practice finding the author's purpose in text that we read. Follow along as I read this text out loud. Learning to play the violin requires mastering different skills. First, you must learn how to position the violin properly by resting it under your chin. Next, you learn how to maneuver the bow. You pull the bow across the strings to make the sounds. Then you must learn how to hold down the strings with your fingers on the neck of the violin. This makes the different notes as you move your bow across different strings. Finally, you must read the music to know which notes to play. Now, I'm going to give you a few seconds to look back at the text and see if you can figure out what was the author's purpose: to persuade, inform, or entertain. Well, when I look at the text, one of the first things that stands out to me is the first sentence. Learning to play the violin requires mastering different skills. When I read through the text, it seemed like I was learning about the steps that you need to take to play the violin. For example, it said that first you must learn how to position the violin under your chin, and then you had to learn how to move or maneuver the bow by pulling the bow across the strings to make the sounds. Then you had to learn how to hold down the strings with your fingers on the neck of the violin so that you can make the different notes. And finally, you had to be able to read music to know which notes to play. When I look at all of this information, it seems to me that the author's purpose is to inform. The author is giving us information and facts about how to play the violin. Let's look at our next piece of text. This piece of text is actually about my dog, Shem the St. Bernard. Follow along as I read the text out loud. One winter day, Shem the St. Bernard went on an adventure. Leaving his cozy mountain home, he walked through the thick, fluffy snow. As he walked, he caught cold, wet snowflakes on his tongue. Shem frolicked and played gleefully in the snow. While romping through the snow, he met two swift rabbits who played tag with him. Then he watched ice skaters spinning and twirling on the frozen lake. Next, Shem chased a squirrel up a tall tree. He knew that next time he would corner that sneaky squirrel. Finally, Shem went home and laid by the warm glow of the fireplace. What an adventure he had! Now I'm going to give you a few seconds to look at this text and see if you can figure out what the author's purpose was. Was it to persuade, inform, or entertain? When I look at this text, there's a couple sentences that stick out to me right away. First of all, the first sentence says, one winter day, Shem the St. Bernard went on an adventure. This sounds like we have a character, Shem the St. Bernard, and they're going on an adventure. So it sounds like we're going to be reading a story. And at the end, we talk about what an adventure he had. So we know that there were certain things that Shem did throughout his adventure, and the text here tells us all the different things that he did while he was out. That he caught cold, wet snowflakes on his tongue, that he played in the snow, he played tag with rabbits, he watched ice skaters, he chased a squirrel up a tall tree, and then finally, he went home and laid by the fireplace. So when I look at all of this information together, it doesn't seem like in the text that I'm learning a lot of information or facts like I did about how to play the violin. It doesn't seem like there's any kind of opinions or reasons being shared by the author. It doesn't seem like the author is trying to get me to think a certain way or do something. But this really was a fun story to read. It was enjoyable, and I got to see how the character Shem went throughout the story and what he did and how it ended. So looking at all this information, I think the author's purpose was to entertain. Now, let's look at our last piece of text. Follow along as I read the text aloud. Swoosh! Nothing beats the sound of the ball hitting the back of the net. Soccer is the world's most exciting sport. Two teams battle it out on the field for 90 minutes of non-stop action. Players do amazing tricks with their feet to get the ball around their opponents. Players even move the ball with their heads. If you are looking for an exciting, action-packed sport to try, soccer is your best bet. Now, I'm going to give you some time to look at the text and see if you can figure out what was the author's purpose. Was it to persuade, inform, or entertain? When I look at the text, there were a couple things that really stood out to me. First of all was the sentence, soccer is the world's most exciting sport. This really seems like this is the author's opinion, that it's the most exciting sport. For me, I do think soccer is the most exciting sport. I played it all the way through high school and college and even as an adult, so I would definitely agree with this. But you may think that there's another sport that's more exciting. Also, the ending sentence says, if you are looking for an exciting, action-packed sport to try, soccer is your best bet. This seems like the author is trying to get me to want to play soccer. There's also a lot of reasons that the author gives for why soccer is the most exciting sport and why you should try it. They say that nothing beats the sound of the ball hitting the back of the net, that the players battle it out for 90 minutes of nonstop action, and that they do amazing tricks and even move the ball with their heads. So looking at all this information, I really think that the author's purpose is to persuade. The author is trying to get us to think that soccer is the most exciting sport and also to want to try it. Now we're going to play a game called What's the Purpose? Underneath these cards are different types of text, and we're going to flip over a card and you're going to have to determine what is the purpose of the text. Is it to persuade, inform, or entertain? So let's get our first card. We are going to pick this card. A story about a giant and a beanstalk. Would the author's purpose for a story like this be to persuade, inform, or entertain? Say your answer out loud. Well, it doesn't sound like a story about a giant and a beanstalk is something that an author is giving me a lot of facts and information about a topic, or that they're trying to get me to do something or to believe or think a certain way. I think a story about a giant and a beanstalk would probably just be something that I would have fun reading. So I'm going to say that the author's purpose would most likely be to entertain. Now, let's look underneath another card. A letter to the editor about why people shouldn't play video games. What would the purpose of this letter be? Would the author's purpose be to persuade, to inform, or entertain? Say your answer out loud. Well, when I think about a letter to the editor, usually when people write letters to the editor of a newspaper, they're trying to state their opinion and give reasons for why they feel a certain way. And usually they're writing the letters that other people will read it and hopefully feel the same way that they do. So I think in this case that the letter to the editor is, the author's purpose is to persuade. I think the author is trying to get people to think about and agree that we shouldn't play video games. Now, let's flip over another card. A recipe to make cookies. If I read a recipe to make cookies, what would the author's purpose be? Is it to persuade, inform, or entertain? Say your answer out loud. A recipe tells me how to make something. It tells me what ingredients I need and the steps to follow to make something like cakes or cookies. So I think the author's purpose in that recipe would be to inform. They're giving me information and facts and telling me how to make the cookies. Let's flip over another card. A speech about why summer is the best season. If I read a speech like this, what would the author's purpose be? To persuade, inform, or entertain? Say your answer out loud. If I read a speech about why summer is the best season, I would probably find a lot of opinions and reasons for why the author of that speech thinks summer is the best. It sounds like the author is trying to persuade me to think that summer is the best season, even though I may think that another season is the best. So the author's purpose would be to persuade. Now, let's flip over our last card. An article about the planets in our solar system. If I read an article like this, what do you think the author's purpose would be? To persuade, inform, or entertain? Say your answer out loud. If I read an article about planets in our solar system, I would probably learn a lot of facts and information about the different planets that we have around us. So I would say that the author's purpose is most likely to inform. You did a great job with today's lesson about author's purpose. If you'd like to practice using and identifying author's purpose in text that you read, please visit our website where you can download, print, and complete additional activities. Have a great day!